here. I was born in Hollywood, Florida. Then we moved up here, Kissimmee. So I went to first grade over in Kissimmee. I remember my elementary school, Miss Chestnut was our teacher. She had these big old fat pencils. She'd pop us on the head or rulers on her hands, and the principal walked around with ping pong paddles. Oh yeah, our punishment was that for having lifesavers in the library. I mean, that was the kind of punishment we got for chewing gum. So silliness back then. Stayed there, and then we moved to Atlanta. We stayed there till 1975, 5 years, and went to fourth and fifth grade. And then we moved all over. Moved to Alabama, Birmingham for a while. And eventually ended up back in DeLand, which I graduated from, 1981. Played on the soccer team. I always wanted to get a varsity letter for playing on a sports team, and I guess I could do that. Baseball, they had it rigged, couldn't get in. Football, I was too small. The soccer, I said, well, I'll try that. So I got my letter and played varsity. Before I joined the military, I was working in cabinet shops, building cabinets, working in the hometown. And he was making $4 an hour. It's 1984, 85. $4 an hour. That was $175 a week. I was like, and it's pretty much running you ragged and not paying you. So I figured, well, if they're going to run me ragged, I might as well pray and say, God, what you want me to do with my life? 'Cause I don't know what to do with my life. Staying here at hometown or go somewhere else. So anyway, I felt like the Lord led me to join the Navy, and it's amazing. The Navy fit me like a glove. It's very fit my personality, and it was good. It was good for me, good for my finances, good for my future wife because it's stable. So it turned out real well. Did a lot of deployments overseas. That was hard on us, but other than that, George Bush Sr. was the president at the time, and the buildup of all the troops were Desert Shield, and that started after Saddam had invaded Kuwait. Kuwait was a country that mind their own business. Saddam decided to invade Kuwait and to do something horrible. So President Senior, George Bush Sr. said, that's enough of this, to Saudi Arabia and edge of Kuwait, not in Kuwait, and then United Arab Emirates, Oman. So we were basically building up. So he started building up Desert Shield is what it's called. And I was in Virginia Beach waiting because they told us, get ready. Then we got word that President Bush started Desert Storm. And that's when he started sending Tomahawk missiles, cruise missiles. And of course, Saddam Hussein said, if the U.S. attacks us, we will attack Israel. So we set up Patriot missile batteries inside Israel. Saddam would send Scud missile over to Israel, but Patriots would intercept. I think a couple got through, but most of them were shot down by the Patriots missiles defense. So anyway, they told us we're leaving to Desert Storm, and my wife was pregnant at the time, so it was very hard and very difficult for me and her to separate during that pregnancy. It's a very terrible thing. Your wife needs you, but you got to get pulled away to go fight a war. You don't know where you're going, you don't know when you're coming back, you don't know where you're going to be, you don't know if there's any telephone. There was no email system. There was none of that. So you don't know no communication. So anyway, they got sent over. in January. But anyway, they sent us over, and we stayed there in United Arab Emirates, and we were supposed to hit Kuwait Beach. We were with the Marine Corps. The Seabees were going to help the Marines build their facilities, which is hardback tents, plywood tents, and all these things to help them have a place to come back to so they can be supported. So by the time that we were over there, ground war started and the Marine Corps was fighting. We had all these body bags that were in our presence, and they expected 60% casualty of us because we were supposed to hit Kuwait Beach and help. And before we go to the beach, they had to roll the beach with steel rollers. Come out, and what happened was Saddam had planted landmines everywhere, in the water, on the land, on the beach, landmines everywhere. U.S. Navy actually had dolphins that were attached with electronics that could deter or find landmines for us. They didn't blow up the dolphins, no, but they would detect. So it's very dangerous. So they expected us, 60% of us, to die, and I was chosen to drive the roller to roll the beach for safety before all the other troops came and landed on Kuwait Beach. So it was very, didn't know if you're going to live or die. Very difficult, especially when you have a pregnant wife at home. It's very terrible. Horrible thing to go through. So, I'm stuck on this DEMA barge. We were stuck in United Arab Emirates, waiting on the call from the President and the Department of Defense for us to go to Kuwait Beach. And of course, you know, General Schwarzkopf was in charge. He had told them we were going to do a certain thing, and so Saddam put all his forces and planted landmines near Kuwait Beach. And Schwarzkopf led the troops with kind of a hook and came around the other side of Iraqi troops, and Iraqi troops were caught off guard. So the war ended very quickly. We had thousands of Iraqi soldiers surrendering to the troops, because Saddam was not giving them food and water anyway. He wasn't feeding them. We cut off supply lines, and then Saddam didn't get through, or whatever happened. So they were surrendering. Guess what we did when we caught the people? We caught the Iraqi troops, we set them down and fed them food and water. People talk about the military like it's some negative thing. It showed the heart of America. Even in wartime, we helped the enemy, fed and watered them. So all this negative talk about how we mistreat prisoners, we didn't. The place where I was, we helped them. It's a shame to hear negativity about the American soldier, and they don't have the truth. So after that, we had thousands of troops, and then of course Saddam had captured Kuwait. Then he was going to retreat because he was losing. So he takes everything, all his equipment and everything, started fleeing Kuwait. President George Bush Sr. decided to use B-52 bombers and carpet bomb their convoys, which is stolen. And so they were going down, they call it the highway of death. If you look in history, you can't escape that. You have these huge planes dropping thousands of bombs, and they're in a line and in behind formation dropping thousands of bombs on this convoy who had just ripped off an innocent country. And the highway of death was what it's called, and it shows pictures of what happened. Most of that convoy was destroyed. So huge display of military power, but it was justified, I think, because Kuwait was an innocent country who they'd killed, robbed, murdered, whatever else they did. So, and set their oil wells on fire. So another thing Iraq did was set oil wells on fire all over. It's just craziness. So, so by the time that they had done that, we were about 2.5 hours away from landing on Kuwait Beach, or actually shipping out to the Kuwait Beach. And George Bush Sr. called off the war because it's basically pushed Saddam out of Kuwait back into Iraq, and that was his goal. Stop. So we were like, had all our bags packed, had the rifles, everything ready. So did I go into combat? No, not necessarily. I was in the combat zone. But I salute all the troops that were in the combat zone, the Army, Marine Corps, and anybody else that were in that line of combat, which was missiles fired, bullets firing. Very difficult on families to go and have their husbands, fathers, and wives, and people that you know going into the combat zone. Very difficult. Because you don't know if they're going to live or die. It's terrible stress upon a family here in the States. All they had was CNN back then. People were glued to CNN. I know mothers that were glued watching to see if their sons, if their unit was being attacked or anything happened to their sons, just glued to it. It was like, you know, you didn't have emails, you didn't have any of the electronics, no Skype, nothing. So, I mean, I'd send a letter to my wife back then. It would take 2 weeks to get to her, or a month. Then I'd get a response 2 weeks later. This is craziness. Fortunately, they'd come out with, you know, USO came around with phones, satellite phones that we could call home once in a while. I think I had a nice talk with her once every 3 or 4 weeks. They'd come by with a free phone call to home. You could buy phone cards and a pair of Emirates. We could $30 for 15 minutes. Very expensive. So you're fortunate if you caught your family member at home. They didn't have cells back then. Nowadays it's a little more better. You got the Skype, email. So anyway, so I stayed there after the war. Desert Storm, that war was over. Persian Gulf War was over. Called off. I came home. Made it back. My wife was pregnant. And as soon as I got back, they said, "You're going back over. We need a team to go back over." That's terribly hard on her. And one of my guys raised his hand and said, "Mike's wife's pregnant. I'll take his place." It's very, you know, very kind of the guy that did that for me. So I was there for my first kid, my first child's birth. And they sent other guys to help clean up, turn off the oil wells, to help stabilize where we were, stuff like that. So everything's so regimented when you're in the military. Time to eat, time to wake up, time to work out, time to do drills, time to prepare. It's always so regimented. When you come home, you have so much freedom. It's kind of nice, you know, coming back to the States, and there's freedom. You're not under fire. You don't have to carry a weapon around all the time. It's just amazing. It's amazing subculture. Being in the military is a subculture, really, because everything is so, you know, regimented. So I have to make an adjustment. When I came back from Japan, we had drove on the left side of the highways, and the driver's steering wheel was on the right side of the vehicle. So when you're on the highway, you're on the left side of the highway, exiting to the left. It's all backwards. It's weird. When I came home, I started driving on the left side of the road, and my wife said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" I was coming head on to this guy, and I was waving him to move over. She says, "I think you need to let me drive." So, it takes a lot of adjustment. And plus, you're surrounded by all your other soldier friends and all this, and you come home to your family. It's a big adjustment. As you live with cursing, rambunctious sailors, or Navy guys, Seabees, which I live with, to come home to a family. Readjustment. They had chaplains where we went, but it wasn't a squeaky clean environment. You hang out with construction fellas, which I was a construction team, Seabees, and you know construction teams and civilian. We ain't all that perfect. A lot of fun, hooting, hollering, roughnecks. And that's what it was like. So when I came home, I had to watch my mouth. The thing I want to say about the Seabees Construction Battalion, that's what we were. It's a very elite part of the Navy. I'm sure that the Air Force have Red Horse, it's their construction team. Army Corps of Civil Engineers, their construction team. I forget what the Marines are, but we have the Seabees for the Navy. That's what I was part of. Well, we did a lot of humanitarian efforts. People talk about, we build and we fight. And that's what our motto was, we fight, but mostly we help folks. I should have said we build, we fight, but we also help folks. When we were in Japan, we dug wells for Japanese. And then when we were in Cuba, showed many pictures of, there was a Cuban-Haitian refugee crisis in 1995. And they were building makeshift rafts coming from Cuba and Haiti to escape their country. And we were intercepting them, bringing them instead of them swamping or dying out in the ocean. We were intercepting them to save their lives. Military ships bringing them to Cuba, feeding them, building them tents to stay under from the shelter and weather, and giving them food and water and cots to sleep on, and a place to stabilize first so they wouldn't die out in the ocean, and so the influx would be overwhelming in Miami or wherever they landed. It was horrible. There was 50,000 refugees on Guantanamo Bay at that time. It was terrible. So our job, me and the Seabees and whoever else was on base helping us, Red Horse, and we were trying to give them water, food, place to shower, place to use the restroom, all kinds of stuff, the basic needs of human beings need. And they were coming up to me, bringing me handwritten letters, "Please give this to my family in Miami." I don't know how in the world I could possibly get it there. The Haitians, Cubans were separated in different camps, and they were catching animals on Guantanamo Bay and cooking them and open fire. I mean, it was just a madhouse. They would jump on the side of our trucks. I mean, we had to put them in a containment area to keep this organized so we could drive down the road and take care of them. Marines were called in a few times. We had a bad boy camp we set up because they had criminals involved who were very hateful, and they would hurt other people. There's some nasty, like I said, there's always some black sheep in society that make it hard on the good guys, the bad. The Haitians rioted once when they pulled out the tent stakes out of the ground and banged them. They wanted beans and rice, hot meals, and we gave it to them. Chaplain came down who spoke the Haitian Creole language, and he spoke to them and said, "Hey, calm down, we'll get you beans and rice." I mean, the ABC came down complaining because they were treated bad. I said, "Hold on a second. I'm away from my family, helping a foreign country and all the refugees, and my family's at home. Why don't you interview the soldiers here? Because we're, So anyway, there was a mix of criminals that Castro released. It was real nice of him. So anyway, all the bad boys, the criminals he released, came over and they were causing havoc. Marine Corps basically arrested them and put them in a containment camp separate from the normal population of Cubans refugees. So it was a big mess. So after that, our normal job was to build the roads for leeward and windward side for the Marine Corps. You ever seen that movie, Few Good Men? They have a scene where they're driving the Jeep over the hills. In that movie, that's the roads we rebuilt, and graded, and put rock down to help with the Marine Corps. I mean, they used to call it Backbreaker Road because there's so many potholes in it. The Marines would drive their Humvees down and just break their backs in the Deuce-and-a-Half and 5-ton trucks. So, trying to help the Marine Corps, and then the refugees came over and we helped them. So, Seabees in general are a humanitarian part of the military. And when I hear people talk bad about the military, I said, do you really know what we've done? Do you know we helped when Mount Pinatubo, I think it's in the Philippines, blew up? And we were over there with them. Do you know what happened in Guam when we were there? And I was in Honduras when Hurricane Mitch hit. We helped people. We gave them food and water, helped the roads, and helped paint a school, put roof back on. There's so much we do humanitarian. So I ask people to realize that there's a lot of good things the military does. They don't get credit for. And just wanted to speak about the Puerto Rican government also when we were down there. Hurricane George hit, and I was down there when it busted all the windows and water was coming up into the barracks where we lived, and we helped them, humanitarian. So a lot of things we've done that we don't get credit for, and people need to speak about. So I'm speaking about it. We weren't the bombing type. We were the feed, water, build homes and roads, and comfort folks who've gone through a hard time. So CVs, I applaud. They've been all over.